What's the best ultralight tent for two that you can own on a budget? Hey guys, I'm Dan from ShastaBubba Adventures, and I've narrowed it down to just two possibilities, the X-Mid 2 from Durston Gear and Tarptent's Stratospire 2. And today I'm going to run these through a head-to-head comparison, tell you all the pros and cons of both tents, and reveal my pick for the absolute best UL shelter on the market today. And hey, if you like videos like this, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. About 2 years ago, I made a video that described my reasons for choosing the Stratospire 2 and explained why I ruled out all the other common options. I won't repeat all that stuff today, but if you're interested in why no other shelters would work for me, you can check that out up here. What I do want to share from that video is the criteria I was looking for in an ultralight shelter for two. I wanted to find a tent that was, one, reasonably priced, so no DCF shelters since they're all running in the $700 to $900 range these days. Two, wide enough for two wide sleeping pads, which means at least 50 inches. Three, had two doors for easy exit when nature calls in the middle of the night. And four, it has to have double walls so we don't have to worry about condensation. These two tents meet all four of those criteria. In fact, there are many similarities between them. My version of the Stratospire is a bit older and made from sil nylon, but Tarptent switched to sil poly in 2022, so both tents are now the same material. Sil poly's main advantage over sil nylon is less absorption of water, meaning less slack in the guy lines after pitching and less weight when packing up after a night of rain. Both tents have an offset design, so the floor sits cornerwise to the pitch of the fly. However, I've found the X-Mid to be quite a bit easier to pitch and get the floor where I want it to be. The Stratospire has a bigger learning curve to getting the pitch right and seems to demand a larger space for its footprint. It had been a while since I last put the Stratospire up, and quite frankly, it took me a few minutes to remember how to do it. Even though I had pitched it many times before, it just is tricky to visualize. I've found the X-Mid can be lifted slightly when placing the third stake to locate the floor right where I want it to be. Both tents are 52 inches wide, but the length is 86 inches on the Strato versus 92 for the X-Mid. The Tarptent website says the Strato can, quote, expand to 62 inches, unquote, but doesn't explain how, so I'm guessing that would be by pushing the pads out and flattening the bathtub floor. I have to say that the bathtub floor on the Stratospire seems a bit higher than the X-Mid, and perhaps because of this, the Strato also seems a bit wider. So perhaps by pitching lower, you could squeeze a few more inches into the width, although I think the claim of gaining an extra 10 inches is an exaggeration. The X-Mid seems a bit longer, which is borne out by the stats, but that's a bit misleading because it counts the trapezoidal corners. But you can see here that there clearly is more room in the length of the X-Mid, and that could be a deciding factor if someone was looking for a solo shelter with tons of space. I mention that point because I did in fact take the X-Mid 2 on more trips than planned last year, because it's just more comfortable inside than my go-to Locust Gear Khufu, although almost a pound heavier. Both websites include the stakes in their weights, but I've removed that because I think stakes are such an individual preference and you likely won't be carrying the stakes that come with the X-Mid. Without stakes, the Stratospire comes to 41 ounces versus 38 ounces for the X-Mid, so that's just a 3-ounce difference between these two. The Stratospire used to go for $360, but that price has dropped, possibly to better compete with the X-Mid, so both tents now are $300. That's a great price for either of these great shelters. Both can be pitched fly first in the rain, and the inner mesh tents on both of them attach with buckles that can be tightened. The fly toggle on the Strato is the standard barrel and loop closure, but the X-Mid has moved to a really convenient magnetic toggle. I like that a lot, and it was one of the improvements that motivated me to sell my version 1 and upgrade. Unfortunately, the mesh tents on both shelters just have stretch cords that need to be tied, which I really don't like because it's a bit fiddly and takes two hands to do it. I wish that would be switched to a simple barrel and loop tie-out instead. So what about the differences? Well, Tarptent decided to stick with sil nylon for the floor of the Stratospire, and it's 30 denier versus 20 denier sil poly on the XMID, making the floor more durable. In fact, overall, I have the impression of the Stratospire as being a bit more robustly constructed, although that impression might not really stand up to scrutiny. Because, for example, the XMID is seam taped and double stitched, whereas Tarptent still says it's necessary to seal the seams and offers a seam sealing service, it's hard to say, for an extra $35. To be fair, that might be a glitch in the website that just hasn't been corrected since they switched to sil poly, but I'm not sure. It seems like, it's been over a year. They would have fixed that by now if that wasn't the case. Both tents offer a number 5 AquaGuard waterproof zipper on the fly, and I really like the design of the Stratospire in this case, where they run the zipper right into the peak vent with a two-way zipper, so you can really open that up for venting. Probably the biggest advantage of the Stratospire over any other tent is the fantastic venting options between the peak zipper and what they call the pitch lock ends that open for low-level venting as well. Unfortunately, that feature also leads to what, in my opinion, is the greatest flaw of the Strato, and that's the 16-inch struts that form those pitch lock ends, which means that the Strato can't be rolled up any smaller than that, and that means it won't fit inside the pack. It also won't fit in most side pockets, so being forced to carry it on top of the pack at all times is a major drawback. I also find the Stratospire to be much more difficult to get packed up in the stuff sack than the XMID, which is relatively easy. The XMID has 4 internal pockets, 2 down low and 2 in the peaks, versus just 2 pockets on the Stratospire, which are low and poorly designed. The XMID has little straps on the side for attaching to the trekking poles, and that helps greatly to stabilize the sides and aids with zipper operation of the mesh tent. Tarptent is one of the few tent makers who provide excellent stakes standard, although you will need at least 2 additional stakes for the peak guyouts. And I really think they are necessary to use on the Stratospire, whereas I've never actually bothered using the peak tie-outs on the XMID despite being in some pretty heavy weather. The stakes that come with the XMID are frankly useless, unless you camp where there is thick sod to hold the Ultralight stakes in place. When I did my review of the XMID 2, that was the first version, and I mentioned there were several improvements coming with version 2, such as those magnetic door toggles and improved pocket design. Now that I upgraded to version 2, it turns out that there are even more improvements, like this little corner strut in 2 of the corners that helps keep the bathtub shape. And I believe they are using different cordage now. It's smoother, so it slides better in the line locks. So, bottom line, which do I prefer? Well, I've tried to present fairly all the pros and cons of both shelters, but the truth is there really is no contest. The XMID 2 is clearly the winner for me. I actually have only taken the Stratospire a few times because I found it kind of a pain to use. It's tricky to set up, difficult to stow in the stuff sack, and most of all, awkward to carry on top of the pack. The XMID had the opposite effect, and I ended up taking it on extra trips because it was so comfy, dirt simple to put up, roomy inside, and I especially love the views with the one short vestibule door closed and a large door open. Lighter and easier to stow in the stuff sack, but most of all is the pack size, allowing me to put it inside the pack on shorter trips. For me, it's a clear choice, and I'll be looking forward to taking my XMID 2 on many more hikes. Okay guys, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care.